Welcome to Plus One Forward, the podcast powered by the Apocalypse, where we talk about tabletop role-playing games using or inspired by the Apocalypse engine. I'm your co-MC, Rach.
And I'm your co-MC, Rich. Hey, Rach, how are you doing? Here at the end of 2021. I'm going to say 2021, so we get it right.
Yes, in my show notes, I noticed I kept writing about what I was going to look forward to in 2021, and then I was horrified.
You do not need to have a do-over.
No more 2020, no more 2021. I'm done. Can we go on to the next one?
Yeah. So 2021, that was, it was a year.
Yeah, it was a year. 12 months.
12 months.
How many weeks? I lost track of those.
52-ish. I love this episode. It's really fun to sit down, take stock of the year as it happened in gaming, especially from that PbtA lens. And I love to break it down with you, Rach. So this is something I really look forward to.
Yeah, and I like talking about the games of our year in the perspective of playing those games and not just necessarily from a higher level sort of discussing design, because I think a lot of end of year discussions, at least in conventions and on panels, tend to be, I felt the design of this game was good, rather than this game delivered this really cool experience that I'm going to associate with this year forever.
Yeah, exactly. There are at least two experiences that from a read I would not have expected from a game that I got to play this year.
I think that is a good opportunity to jump over and talk about your playing highlights of 2021. Did I get the year right? 2021.
You did. You nailed it.
So speaking of numbers.
Yep, here we go. For those who are just tuning in, Rich obsessively tracks all of his RPG plays on RPGgeek.com. You can too. More people should, because there are times when I go in and I'm the only person who's played a particular game. I know that's not true because I've played it with at least 4 other people at times. But because of that, I can do a little bit of querying. I played 30 different PbtA games in 2021, same as 2020. 15 of those PbtA games were new to me, same as 2020. So I cloned there. However, I got 2 more game sessions of PbtA games, only PbtA, 2 more game sessions. So a total of 172 game sessions. Yes, I played a PbtA game every 2.1 days in 2021.
You're more PbtA than man now.
Yes.
It's a lot of PbtA.
It's a lot.
So much.
Of powering by apocalypses. Highlights for me, our home game of Scum and Villainy. I took the hut space info that I was directed to the Blades in the Dark community forum. Thank you, Strash, for directing me there. Tim Deeney and Callum Grace created this hut space stuff with all the factions, and that was great. I just imported it in. We played on Roll20, which was a fun experience. It's the most I've played on Roll20 in quite a while. Normally with PbtA, you don't need it. That said, there are some fantastic PbtA implementations for Roll20, Scum and Villainy being one of them. That said, I found Roll20 to be a little lacking for NPC picks and some other information, so I forced the group to also look at a Google Sheet. Sorry.
It was fun. There's all these cute little character portraits, and we also used the Google Sheet to keep track of components that weren't necessarily represented best in Roll20. So I think it was the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it was, but I was disappointed because I know one of our players struggled because they're a 1-screen player and I'm a 2-screen player, so it's really easy for me to manage that, but you got to think about folks that are playing on laptops and the like and try to design for that, and it just wasn't fair to them, and I felt a little guilty. That said, we had lots of fun with Scum and Villainy. Rach, you and I digging into our Star Wars geekiness. Of course, that was delightful. The side tangents where we would both jump to Wikipedia to see who could find obscure factoid first and then try to explain it to the other people who were rolling their eyes at us. That was actually fun.
They better learn to tolerate our nerdiness if they're playing a Star Wars game with us.
They did sign the waiver. So another thing that I hadn't seen to this point in my Blades in the Dark play is just the sheer glee that people took with, oh, I overindulged. Guess I'm playing a new character.
Oh my gosh, this happened so many times and it was always so funny.
It was.
It was delightful. We had, my character never overindulged, but we had a couple of players who had multiple PCs by the end of this campaign.
It was really neat and quite amusing. Just like, which hat are you going to put on tonight?
What PC sheet are you grabbing?
Exactly. I have to say, the Scum and Villainy, we found a good place to put it to bed for 2021. So in 2022, we'll be kicking off with some masks for the home game. But I am very much looking forward to potentially revisiting this series next year. I'd like to come back to it. Maybe we have some time pass. I don't know. Maybe we pick up right after.
Yeah, it really hit a unique vibe. And in the scale of Blades in the Dark, I hesitate to use the term cozy, but it was a really lovely, heartwarming ending to a very strange game, of which we'll probably talk a little bit more about it in my highlights. Was one where we talked about the morality of the characters and the intended morality of the game and went really neat places with it.
Yeah. I think Scum and Villainy has built in the opportunity to play characters that are not necessarily scum or villainous. I wasn't sure if that was something we'd explore when I said, hey, let's play it in Hut Space, but we did. We found genuine and interesting characters who cared about each other a lot in very surprising ways, and I liked that.
And sometimes didn't care when various characters disappeared. Yeah, they're just working off their debts at the casino. It's fine.
Next for me was Hut Cartel. I love Cartel. I love Hut Cartel. I've talked about it many times, but for 2021, one of my highlights was watching Will H. from The Gauntlet. First of all, he took the deck of locations, which answers a question for a lot of PbtA that I haven't seen as well or fully implemented, which was an entire deck of cards that you can have for a PDF of locations. And they all have mechanics tied to them, mechanisms that reinforce the economies of Cartel in very exciting ways. From, hey, this is a place that you could hold a party so that you can roll with a different stat, or this is the veterinarians. Of course, the can't go to a doctor, go to a veterinarian moment as I do air quotes that you can't see on audio. Will took that and hacked it for Star Wars, for 1313, of course, on the subterranean levels of the capital world. It was great to see that. It's exciting to see mechanics. Like when you go here, there are things that you can play with from a PbtA mechanics way that isn't just fluff. It isn't just, oh, I'm going to go to the races. No, if you go to the races, here's some options you have. And it's fun. I really liked it.
The one question I have of this is, knowing that Cartel is meant to be inspired by telenovelas, did Hut Cartel feel like the 1313 TV show we never got?
That's a great question. I have two answers. So first of all, when Will ran it, his influences were less telenovela and more The Wire. So yes, it felt like a TV show, but it was a very gritty TV show. It was very hard. There was always a cost to things. No one had altruistic motives. Everyone was looking for an angle. You always had a price to pay. And it was fascinating, but it was deadly. I was playing a spy. It was one of the playbooks that Will had hacked. I was playing a spy. I got my handler killed because I made a bad choice. I trusted the wrong person and got my handler killed. And so I was in the wind for the last 3 sessions of the game. I was that person who's gone so deep undercover that they're lost to it. It was rough. It was hard, Rach.
It sounds like it was an incredible arc to play through, though.
It was. Yes, hashtag worst spy was still pretty great. There were so many nice edge moments and tragedies in that game. I mean, this is a character that by the end of a 2-month series, had gotten her handler killed, had lost her partner because had just caused too many problems for them that they had to cut loose, and also was mauled by a Corellian dog and lost her eye and had to get a cybernetic replacement. It was just, at the very end of the game, I'm like, oh, I feel so, oh, Edema, you broke my heart, you poor girl. It was great. It was really, really good. Action Movie World is a game I've literally had on my to-play list for years, Rach, and I've never gotten into the table. The only experience I had with it was with Ian for a previous episode of Plus One Forward, and I finally got it to the table this month, and I had a great time. It is, remember I mentioned those 2 games that at a read versus an experience? At a read, some of the moves are a little, like, this is early gen PbtA development.
I was going to say, this is an old game, isn't it?
Yeah, it's old. It's real old. It's that kind of, the move would say, okay, on a 10 plus, choose this many, and then on a 7 to 9, choose 1. But the way it's like formatted, you're like, wait, which list am I looking for? And so at a read, you're like, this looks confusing. But in play, once you get over that, because all of them are written in that way, so once you get over the hump, it's gone. It's just one of those, oh, this is old design. But the mechanics itself are really slick because it's working on 2 layers. There's a meta layer of your character is an actor. That actor is in an action movie. So you're portraying the actor in the movie, but you're also playing through the movie, right? There is no movie script. So there are economies that you're trying to build up in the movie, such as camaraderie, which is the shared pool that will allow you to take out the big bad. And it's gated, as in you're going to have a lot of trouble taking out the big bad if you don't have this camaraderie super move. But if you burn through the camaraderie move, you have to build it back up again. So it's got this nice little ebb and flow of play that is built around teamwork, reinforcement, that kind of stuff. The refresh rolls from Lady Blackbird, that stuff going on. It's really cool. Yeah, Action Movie World's a game that I was delighted by. And it was actually a finalist for one of my favorite games of the year. I had a great time with that game. And then the other game that the play of it revealed things I did not intuit from reading the rules. And again, well-designed game, more recently released game from Black Armada. Josh Fox put it out. It's basically Battlestar Galactica with the serial numbers filed off. When you start off, your stats suck, Rach. This is not a game built for 7 to 9s. It is built for a lot of failures. You got a lot of 0s and -1s. And your development cycle is not going to get you those stats to 2s and 3s to where you're succeeding. However, you can develop relationships with people much more easily. And then as the game develops, you can start swapping out those relationships for the modifier on a lot of the important rolls that you make. So as we're playing, I realize, this is the story of people realizing they have to depend on each other to get stuff done.
So you're saying it's a game that actually does lean in hard into needing to use your history and your bonds that are just underengaged in other PbtA games.
Absolutely. Such a great rephrasing. Yes, it was so cool to see that unfold through play because I ran it for 2 months. And by that second month, I was starting to see people going, no, let's push this up. Let's explore this. Let's reinforce this between our characters. And then seeing the mechanics start to reward that over and over. It was so cool. It also has a very cool helping move that answers a problem I've had in so many other PbtA games, which is I'm not in the scene, but that person just blew that roll. Is there anything I could do? In every other game, the answer is not really. But this game literally has a move called Wait Helplessly, where
oh my God,
you narrate your character thinking about that person and pulling for them, and then you get to roll to help them. It's so cool. Love that move.
That's such a weird cinematic trick. Because again, you can have such a good visual of, oh, this happens in storytelling all the time, but how do I mechanically put this in this game? Like, I'm thinking about that character right now. Gonna make a roll for them.
So good. And then I mentioned this on the Favorite Game of the Year episode on the Gauntlet podcast. Bounty of the Week, definitely my favorite game of the year because of the cycle of play and design. I talked more about it there, so I'll talk less about it here. But Bounty of the Week is a Monster of the Week hack. And Monster of the Week is an older game. It's got a second edition. It's got a solid chassis. It doesn't have a whole lot on the social mechanics side. There's not a lot of emotional play built into Monster of the Week. That's not what it's about. It's not what it cares about. But for doing bounty hunters and Star Wars, that's all you need. It's good. I've bolted on some stuff from outside of the PbtA sphere into this game. Stole a helping move from Legacy Life Among the Ruins, which is brilliant. And it's a hard game. It's fun. It's not Hut Cartel hard, but it's hard enough. It's pretty great. Those are my highlights for 2021 PbtA play. What about you, Rach?
Well, let's start back at the top again and talk a little bit more about Scum and Villainy, the +1 forward home game campaign for the back half of this year. It was really compelling to play a game that had a lot of bells and whistles and gears to fiddle with, because we started playing Scum and Villainy as a side project to doing the summer series, which was on Forged in the Dark. And it was very different than the summer before, when we were playing a lot of Belonging Outside Belonging, which doesn't have a lot of very complicated mechanics. And now going back to a game where there's pips and you can fiddle around with your sheet. And there is still a lot of narrative control and storytelling in there, but also fiddly bits. To go back to the morality of the missions and how that ended up shaping our crew, I did enjoy there was a mission that on the mission board that was so distasteful that we asked you to invert it. We're like, we're not stealing a spy. Was it a spy or a mechanic and engineer? We had to kidnap someone for the Empire, I think was the job on the job board. And we're like, we are not okay with this, which ended up with a whole sort of pseudo out of character discussion about the expected morality. And I think your compromise was we could invert the mission and kidnap that agent, but send them to the rebellion. I think that was the last one that ended off our campaign too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it sure was.
But you also had lots of missions to get into the fluff, as it were, of living on the outer rims in the Star Wars universe with rival racing teams and stealing trophies, that type of shenanigan. Who liked who on the station?
Well, we had to get our little bit of shipping and relationship drama and all that good stuff in there. We had to.
Investigating NPCs you've hired. I loved my little medical team. I kept picking up NPCs. We had one guy, Duroc, who is, I don't know if you had the same opinion of him, Rich. I saw him as like a stoned out kid and probably 18, 19 years old, who wasn't quite sure why he was there. Yep. We'd point him in a direction and then he usually came back successful. It was definitely a lot of fun. Remind me how much I do enjoy playing in the Star Wars sandbox. I can definitely empathize with how some groups may struggle with playing in a, quote unquote canon setting, especially if they don't necessarily gravitate to the same parts of that established setting. I mean, there was no one in our group that was absolutely dying to play a Jedi, for example.
Right.
But I could see that being a deal breaker of a different group.
Yeah, absolutely. What more highlights do you have?
Highlights of this year. Well, I've talked a little bit about this game elsewhere. I have a spot in my heart for Escape from Dino Island, which I ran as a 2-shot, I believe. It's a lighter game. I was excited to bring it to the home group because I think there are a lot of interesting mechanics that let you do character development on the fly. And I love story time. I love when characters sit down and share bits about their past and we learn a little bit about them, and it kind of retroactively informs their decisions up until now. We had renamed was it Car Run? One of the moves was run, but they had a vehicle, so we were calling the move Car Run to drive away frantically. I was thinking about that yesterday while doing laundry. I'm like, Car Run. I remember Car Run.
I was really excited when we spoke with Micaiah about Thrilling Adventures and found that he was inspired by your favorite part of Escape from Dino Island and put that mechanic into his game. That's cool.
I will talk about this game constantly until everyone has sat down and read it once. I think it's a really interesting little zine game. I think it's worth playing it one night, really relaxed, really chill. It has a lot of tools to guide GMs so you don't have to prep. You just kind of roll things and roll with it. And I think most people playing that a Jurassic Park inspired game are going to be a little bit more relaxed about it and not looking up dinosaurs on Wikipedia and such. More highlights?
Yeah.
What else?
More highlights.
Apocalypse Keys, the other game I won't shut up about. I had to remember if this was a 2020 game or a 2021 game. This was the deciding factor. I believe it was a very early 21 game for us, like January, I think.
Yeah.
It is, as I've said on the Game of the Year podcast, kind of a quantum game. It is a game, but it's not quite a game yet. One day it will become a game, and I'm very excited for everyone to sit down, play that game. It hit, at least from a player perspective, a space in which you're playing an urban fantasy game. You are on the same team, so it kind of leans a little bit more superhero-y urban fantasy, but there is also mystery and conflict. I am really curious to see how the mystery system is going to evolve, because mystery games are not necessarily something PbtA does well. I think a lot of people have taken cracks at trying to figure out how can I make PbtA mechanics play nice with mysteries. There's some unique ones in Apocalypse Keys in terms of finding clues and being able to make a roll to put together and explain from your perspective what the answer to the mystery is. If that makes it into final development, I don't know. Again, very curious to see what stays. And the final highlight of my year would be Apocalypse World. Again, this is the continuation of the 2020 campaign that I think I talked about last year that I play with my partner, Rob, which is really just an excuse for him and I to play fanfic, I guess. We're playing around with characters from the Fate franchise, which is Type Moon's Fate, not Evil Hat's Fate. Often confused, they are separate things. The biggest highlight of this campaign this year, Rich, is I retired a character.
Oh, that's
I have
so
never
cool.
retired a character. It happened.
That is so cool. Oh, man, I'm hyped for you.
It was such a unique moment to think about game mechanics. Storytelling, yes, but game mechanics. Because I had unlocked my 5th advance. I looked at the character sheet and I said, I could retire a character. And Rob said, I'm going to describe what happens now. And once I'm done describing it, you decide what the advancement is going to be, because much like the moves are going to inform the fiction, this advance is going to inform the fiction. And if you want this happy ending that I'm presenting, which is like this beautiful, fulfilling ending that would resolve all of this character's wants and desires, that happens. There are no strings attached. She gets to live happily ever after with her family, and I'll never challenge that if you retire the character out. If you don't retire the character out, this is a setup to future darkness. There is going to be a lot here, so you decide, do you want to entertain this storyline, or are you like, you know what, I'm happy. We don't have to go any further with this character. She can go live immortal on an island in the middle of imaginary space, which is what we ended up doing. So she's vibing with her sisters. I now get to play a favorite NPC as mine as a PC. That was my reward which I haven't built him yet, but that's going to be probably an early 2022 thing.
Okay. You answered my question there. I was wondering, does that mean the campaign's over, or does it mean you create a new character?
Nope, it's not over yet. It is kind of in the realm of spending too much time on Wiki and researching. And Rob sent me screenshots of, I had nothing to do today. Here's 20 tabs, and I've gone down whole discussions of quantum mechanics to try to explain what the heck is going on. Like, all right, well, I ended this part of the campaign. Next.
Man, that is cool. Way to go.
Closure.
I have never retired an Apocalypse World character before. I'm so jealous.
You can have a happy ending for your Apocalypse World characters, too. Sad but true. Actually, I don't think that's sad.
No.
More of them should be happy.
Congrats.
2021 has been, despite being a really long, weird year, has been a year full of games.
Mm-hmm. It has. It's been good games.
What would you say is the big lesson you've taken away from this year in PbtA, Rich?
PbtA as a long-term thing can totally work.
Didn't we have an old episode about this a long time ago?
Probably.
Our answers are probably different.
Very different. So up to this point, I had run a Masks game that lasted 20 plus sessions, but we had a whole lot of characters going and coming back. I played in a very long Monster Hearts campaign a long time ago. It was 20 plus sessions, 2 seasons. It always felt like we were stretching it out, trying to make it last longer. We knew that there was this end in sight. And PbtA isn't really built for campaigns or long-term play. But I say that to say that I learned that it can be. I ran 23 sessions of Star Wars World. That's the duet game that my wife and I have been playing. When I say sessions, that's like 2 different burst sessions where we play for like an hour apiece. So it's like 2 hours. That feels like a whole session with one player.
Oh, yeah, that's a ton of time if you're one-on-one.
Yeah, it is. It is. So 23 of those. Dozen sessions of an Apocalypse World Burned Over series. Ran another dozen sessions of Scum and Villainy. For the home game, I played in 11 sessions of Stars in the Dark, a Star Wars reskin for Blades in the Dark, ran 10 sessions of Plutonian Shards, a game in playtest from Cloven Pines, ran 8 sessions of Bounty of the Week, and ran 7 sessions of Last Fleet. So lots of 2-month, bi-monthly, 3-month things going on this year. Part of that resulting from our, hey, let's hit the bag hard. Bag, like the heavy bag, like a boxer, just so the analogy makes sense. To if hit the bag sounds very different in your brain. Hitting the heavy bag like training or something. Just really trying to dig into Forged in the Dark, same way we did with Belonging Inside Belonging. And I found that PbtA can be, like by default, the Powered by the Apocalypse, the Apocalypse World engine stuff that's cues closer to the original. Those games can, and I think with retire a character, with bring a second character into play, you can absolutely run those games longer than, say, 8 sessions. But by default, most people don't want to. It was an achievement for you to retire a character, right?
It was a big deal. It's the first time I've ever done it.
I've literally never seen someone bring a second character into play in an Apocalypse World game I've been in.
Well, this is actually my 3rd character because I was playing 2 at the same time.
Well, it's a solo game.
Yeah.
But that said, it's rare. And so the things that are built into Apocalypse World that have gone on to other core PbtA engine games are not often used. You just play it as a mini-series. But Blaze in the Dark is not that. Like, it is dense, and it's really built for a campaign. The things we're dealing with now in the 11th, 12th session of Stars in the Dark, like turf and raising up a tier so we can handle bigger conflicts, that it took us to now to get there. Like, it's built into Blaze in the Dark for this to be a campaign. And that's something that I thought I had to give up in PbtA. Scum and Villainy, I said we could revisit it. We played 8 sessions, 8, 9 sessions of Scum and Villainy. It's got legs. There's a lot more we could do with it. I hope to revisit it in 2022. And that's been a big lesson learned for me. Again, Star Wars World was not a campaign level game. This was a game where my wife had taken so many advances that she stopped failing rolls.
Oh no, your game broke!
She just hadn't failed a roll in like weeks. And she was getting XP because the XP in Star Wars World is if you do a thing, it's all intent-based stuff. You get an XP at the end of session if you did so and so and so and so. And she had XP. She ran out of improvements to take. There were no more. There was no more growth. Like mechanically, she was spinning her wheels. And while my wife cares more about the story and doesn't mind being really successful, I was wholly unfulfilled as a GM.
You never get to make a move.
Yeah, I mean, look at me expectantly, honey, so I can take a move. That said, Star Wars World was never a game that was released officially. It went through a few iterations. It's been out for a number of years. I think 2015 is the last time that Nebulon or Omega version came out. So I don't fault it. It's a good, solid game, just not made for a campaign. It's just not what the design focus was. Apocalypse World, Burned Over, Bounty of the Week. These are games that sing in a mini-series, but they start to reach kind of the upper limits because everybody keeps playing the same PC. And then if you have a +2 to +3 with everything, a lot of the grit, a lot of the 7 to 9s where the juicy part of PbtA is, it disappears and becomes a different game. And there are advancement built into a lot of PbtA games that take you to a different layer. You have a gang now, or a holding, or an infirmary. And that can be really fun. And you can start to bring to light aspects of the game and come up with custom moves. There's always a way to try to keep it going. But man, Blades is just really built for it. The whole Force in the Dark system is brilliantly designed for campaigns. And that's my lesson learned for 2021.
As I reflect on what you said, and also reflecting on this development to my Apocalypse World campaign where I retired a character, I was thinking about there was 2 parts that kind of on their own look like they don't talk to each other but do, which is one of the big things when we were playing Scum and Villainy is you have the factions and you have the map, and there's just so much stuff to interact with. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface in terms of factions and what the crew's relationship is to everyone. And there's always background noise going on where people are taking jobs from other people and going around us. And like, what does that mean? You can only see so much of the world at one time. And I think perhaps with PbtA games, your more standard Powered by the Apocalypse game, the lens is a little bit more narrow. And that's not a fault of the game. It's just where the game decides to focus. It reminded me of Rob and I's Apocalypse World game because my new PC is going to be a quarantine, which means you have the checklist of every single session you roll and you start asking questions about how did the apocalypse happen, because it implied this NPC occasionally was answering questions about how did the world end, but now saying, oh, you're in quarantine, that means everything is suspect. What were you actually remembering? And that, again, broadens out and says, here's a bunch of stuff we haven't looked at yet. So that gives a little bit more energy and fuel to go off and explore other things. But that was wholly a quirk of, I went with quarantine. If I had not gone with quarantine, we would not have that new inertia. And I wonder if, given how big the world is in Forged in the Dark, maybe that's a little bit more inherent, is that it could go on for quite some time because there's more places to go, more people to betray, or at least botch jobs for.
That's cool. All right, Rach, it's your turn. Tell me about your lessons learned from 2021.
Oh boy, strap in. We're going to get super pretentious really quickly. I had to sit and think about the best way to explain my personal journey with PbtA this year. I came to a conclusion that my lesson was relearning how to let fun be the driving force in play, but also how to combine art with PbtA.
Combine art with PbtA?
Oh, we're going to go places.
All right.
I had to think about how to self-center the focus of my PbtA play on me, which is kind of a dangerous thought when I describe it like that, because we talk so much about being a good player on this podcast and how to make space for others. But I was wondering, what do I get out of PbtA? Very much a what are games moment for me. I think what happened to me personally is a lot of my gaming stopped in 2020. So going back 2 years, pandemic hits, my gaming stopped. I was very focused on running games for events and meetups and conventions. For new listeners, I was a convention and gaming event organizer until I would say late 2019. I started to take a step back. And that was slowly fading away as the world shut down through 2020. And it was very clear in 2021, I was sitting and by myself and going like, okay, what do I do now? Games had become work for me. How do we go back to making games fun? How do we find that pathway there? And obviously you play games to have fun. That's a little bit reductive. But I felt like I was looking at PbtA much in the same way I was looking as a gaming community organizer to be like, well, if I'm jamming a game, am I making a product for people to enjoy? But okay, well, what if it's not a product, what is it? Now, luckily, I had started in 2020 getting back into art and writing and sort of developing out those. And again, not thinking about writing as writing for game publishing, but writing for myself. And I was like, okay, well, how do we strap gaming onto this and take gaming along for the ride? So when you're doing a lot of creative writing, there's a lot of ideas that just don't really fit. They're cool, but they don't have a space in the short story you're writing. They might be something you jot down in a notebook and never think about again. So I found myself sitting in like early 2021 going, so I got these cool ideas. I should start plugging them into PCs and seeing where this goes.
Nice.
But the experience was absolutely wild because it changed how I was started thinking about character building even. Because instead of just clicking off checkboxes, I was looking at the character sheet and going, all right, well, here's 5 character ideas. What do I like about them? And how can which ones talk to like these moves? Where have I seen this move before in terms of character ideas? Okay, I could steal from this character over here, or this thought, this piece of dialogue that's reflective of some aspect of this character. We're going to note this down on the character sheet. And then that ended up also informing how I was playing games. Like suddenly things became very cinematic because I had these ideas visualized in my brain, almost like leading a little bit more with fiction, but still having negotiations with the mechanics. To pull this back to PbtA specifically, not just I found a new way to think about character generation, is I think that playbooks are a really interesting artistic tool in that it's a limited palette. You only have so many pieces to work with, and you're told, here are pieces, and they'll, in various constellations, they'll fit together and make you something functional. But what person is this? And I found myself getting invested in thinking about who is this person and why do they know these things? And that definitely changed how I started interacting with the games. To give a couple examples, in our Scum and Villainy game, I was playing PAX, the Stitch. Rich called me out on it saying, well, you're a medical professional. You're playing a medical professional, Rach. Don't play your day job. But what Rich didn't know is that PAX came out of an idea of when I was discussing medicine and fiction with other writers. And I had all these interesting thoughts in my head about writing a doctor character, and I had no place for this doctor character to live. So they all got shoved into PAX. And then PAX became this garbage fire of a woman who had a very murky background, was very friendly, but also had various unscrupulous parts of her in a way that was a little bit different than a typical Rach character. Phalos as well, back in Apocalypse Keys, I was playing a Shade. He's definitely informed by a short story I was drafting at that time, because I was thinking a lot about urban fantasy in early 2021. It's made PbtA a lot more fulfilling, because now I'm just playing out the characters I don't have spaces to write. And it's great. It's fantastic. I'm having a blast.
I think one thing that you've keyed in here that other people have brought to the table at games that I've GM'd at cons and stuff that they don't do is that you're taking that kernel of a character you want to write a short story for and letting the mechanics help you to express them in this world, learning about the character but filtered through the game. You're not showing up and looking at the playbooks and going, well, this kind of works, but my character doesn't have shifty eyes. They don't have... They're looking at all the choices, and there's no choice that fits because they've already made their decisions about the character they want to play. But that's not what you're doing. You're coming with the question and enough background to give them a thrust and a personality, and then pouring it into those limited options on a playbook. And I think that's fascinating because you can jumpstart into a game so much more quickly than I could. Because I try to blank canvas, what is this playbook telling me? I don't know. What is this playbook? And I'm looking at 3 or 4. I could play any of these guys. Who needs the cleric? Where's the cleric? I'll just slide into that. But I like that idea of characters that exist in your brain space that you want to express. That's really cool.
It gives me a new appreciation for the members of the gaming community that put a lot on Pinterest and make character dream boards. I finally get it now, Rich. I finally understand where this is coming from.
Very cool.
Why have 20 pages of backstory when you have 20 badass images to riff off of?
And those images are so much more flexible.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's brilliant. That's really cool. What a great lesson. Well, we've come to a little bit of history lesson. So way, way back in the day, there was this awesome podcast called Sons of Cryos, and I was a huge fan. And there was a forum for this podcast, and I was a member and a frequent poster, and I posted up my gaming resolutions for the next year. And one of them was I'd like to make a gaming podcast. And that's how I met Chris Perrin, and I pulled member of our home game, Chris Norwood, along, and we created the Cannon Puncture Show. And from Cannon Puncture Show, I kept in the podcast world, and every year I like to do that gaming resolution because it brought me something pretty wonderful in this slice of the hobby. So gamer resolutions, hey, they're New Year's resolutions, but game focused. And we've done this a few years, so I'm going to talk about my 2021 resolutions that we made last year, specifically because I didn't do so bad a job. So, in it, I said I was going to play 8 different games. I got 6 out of 8 to the table. And I'm victory lapping right now because I've never been quite so successful in any resolution of any kind. So, yay me.
Victory lap time.
What about you? How were your 2021 resolutions?
I'm about 50-50.
Okay.
I had notes that I was excited to play Apocalypse Keys and Run Escape from Dino Island.
Boom, boom.
Got both of those. Was excited to try jamming again. I definitely did that from Dino Island.
Yep.
I need to think about, maybe I can figure out a way to Pinterest myself a campaign together now that I figured PCs out. And my last one, of all the buck wild things that have happened, this was the weirdest one. I wanted to bring friends into PbtA, and that sort of manifests in a way I wasn't expecting. I really got into fanzines a lot in this last year, and I've met a lot of nerds. Turns out a lot of nerds like tabletop role-playing games. There was one project where I met this couple, and it turned out we had met at Gen Con several years ago.
Wow.
And I had bought things from their booth, so I was like, oh, and they were really excited for me to come hang out with them at Gen Con this year. And I was like, haha, funny story. The borders busted. I did not go to Gen Con this year. But it's been fun to introduce potential players to games they might not have considered, because a lot of them are very invested in games that we would expect, like D&D. But then, I go onto my nerd Twitter feed. I'm like, hey, friends, this is Fall of Magic. And everyone's like, oh, it's a scroll. What is this? So I have plans for interesting games to see if I can rally and get a couple of my nerds from like one step removed from the gaming community to go play some games.
Good
so
call.
That is going to get into my resolutions for next year. But what is on your hit list, Rich? What are you aiming to play this year coming up?
Well, because I got 6 out of 8, I, of course, am now going to over-resolve and fail terribly. Here's what I've got.
Okay.
These are games I either want to run or play in 2022. Copperhead County, Brinkwood, Blood of Tyrants, both from the Force in the Dark series. Both are really, really interesting. I want to run the Sprawl. I played in it. Lowell ran this fantastic game of the Sprawl set in the Shadowrun universe, and it was awesome. I really think the Sprawl has some cool things going on. Want to run it. Probably a Star Wars. Voidheart Symphony and Stonetop are 2 games that, well, Voidheart's out, and I want to figure that out. And Paul Beakley, who's been on the show, has created a really, really cool character keeper. So I'm just going to steal that from him. Yoink. And run that sometime. Stonetop, not officially out, but probably going to be out in 2022, I think. Want to play that or run it? Not sure if I don't know. I don't know if my head's around running it, but definitely want to give that a taste. There's a game that we found out about during a recent episode called Tendencies, Spirits, and Glamour. That looks interesting. I've already picked it up, but I have not had a chance to read it all the way through. Another game I found on itch that's also on drive-thru called Burning Hearts Forever. I'm really excited to get that to the table. Arc Ball, a game I found out about because of the Exalted Funeral newsletter.
What?
And that game's pretty neat. Apocalypse World Burned Over, a game that I ran this year, but then there was a September 2021 update that really changed the game, and it was the second season of Ghost in the Shell for me, where I cried out to the universe problems I had with it, and the second season came and fixed all of them. That's what the September 2021 update for Apocalypse World Burned Over was, and I really want to play. And then the last one is the Durango Trilogy. This is, I know I've explained it to you, Rach, at least once, but for podcast listeners, this is my dream thing of the Durango Trilogy is that at one point I want to run 3 interconnected games all set in Durango, Mexico. One of them would be Cartel, because that is the default setting for Cartel. Not Hut Cartel, but like the legit original flavor Cartel. Nahual is set in Mexico, therefore it could be in Durango. And then Pasiones de las Pasiones in Mexico. All 3 games, all set in Durango with overlapping characters. So one character could be introduced in the Nahual game as a Cartel member, and then later it's played by somebody else in the Cartel game. And then maybe the narco from the Cartel game is the jefe in Pasiones. And I just really believe this will be fun, and I just got to do it. I want to do it. That's one of my resolutions. It's a big one. That's the one that I've resolved has to happen in 2022. It's a lot.
I think the last one is like, that's the fictionalized TV version of the first 2 campaigns is all I can imagine in my head.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. It took up a lot of air there. I really want to hear your 2022 resolutions, Rach.
Oh, I forgot about Brinkwood. Now I have to add Brinkwood on my list, but I don't know if I want to run or I want to play it. I kind of want to do both somehow. On the ones I initially was thinking of, Masks, I really want to play an ongoing campaign of Masks. I've had issues with Mask games kind of either being one-shots or stalling out, so that's going to be our opener for the home game in 2022. I haven't quite decided what I'm playing yet. I need to think on that more. Root just released, well, from when we're recording, maybe a week ago. I definitely want to run Root. There's something about the granular nature of some of those mechanics. I know it doesn't please the brains of a all PbtA players, but it's doing something quirky and different and interesting. And I think it can lean into a thematically compelling place. That's definitely on my to-run list.
Cool.
Thirsty Sword Lesbians tried to get to this table in early 2020, and then the world went upside down. That's the one I want to go and take and put in front of my fandom friends and say, this is a fanfic engine. Who wishes to play overly emotional fanfic with me? And see where that goes. And finally, Warmer in the Winter. I don't like Hallmark Christmas movies. Personally, they aren't quite something I would want to watch. But for years, I have talked about wanting heartwarming and cozy PbtA. So I do want to commit to, if there is heartwarming PbtA, I'm going to do something involving the heartwarming PbtA. So maybe it's a short TV movie series or something that we end up playing at some point.
Yes. Oh, I'm here for it. Yes. Those are great resolutions.
Same with yours. I am very excited because there's a couple in there I forgot about. Burning Hearts Forever you showed me the other day. I was really excited about that. Void Heart is definitely on my list. Brinkwood is on my list. Burned Over. I know some people have complicated thoughts on it. I've always found it interesting. It was like, I was going to say it's not quite Dream Askew remix of Apocalypse World. It's something else. It's remixes of the apocalypse.
Indeed.
That would be a good themed episode.
We'll have to figure that one out. Rach, this has been a fantastic year of gaming. I'm so thankful to have you here with me on our journey with PbtA games. The Forged in the Dark Summer series, it was really, really fun, and the home game was revelatory. Just very thankful that we're doing this.
Yeah, the summer series this year really opened my eyes to a lot of cool games that were right up my alley that would have gone completely over my head if we hadn't spent the time to sit down and crunch the numbers, as it were, literally, with Forged in the Dark.
Thanks, everybody, for listening, and I hope you have a very happy new year.
Yes, Happy New Year, and hopefully a mildly better 2022. Let's not scare it. It's quite young.
Plus One Forward is a production of the Gauntlet community, Richard Rogers and Rach Shelkey. You can find us at gauntlet-rpg.com or follow us on Twitter at @+1FWD. If you would like to support our show, visit our Patreon site at patreon.com/gauntlet. The games mentioned on this show use the Apocalypse engine, which is a creation of Vincent and Magay Baker. The music for Plus One Forward is from the Savage Aural Hotbed CD Gomi Daiko. The songs used are Gomi Daiko, Metal Version, and Drowning Attitude. You can find more amazing tunes by Savage Aural Hotbed on their website, www.savageauralhotbed.com.
Listeners, we want to let you know that Hearts of Wulin, our PbtA game of wuxia melodrama, is now available as a PDF on DriveThruRPG. Hearts of Wulin emulates films like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon and Shadow, and TV series like The Untamed and Ancient Detective. It is inspired by the Chinese martial arts novels of Jin Yong and Gu Long and their many adaptations. In these tales, romance is as dangerous as a blade. You can buy Hearts of Wulin at the Gauntlet store on DriveThruRPG. You can find more information and resources for it on our Gauntlet blog, on the Gauntlet webpage at gauntlet-rpg.com.